Yeah, so you can get the QR code if you are here in the room, and if you're online, you can get the Google Docs through Kiko Chat. So let me go ahead and open up our session today. I'm Karen Moe and co-chairing for several years here the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster with Dave Jones, my colleague in crime. And the last couple of years, we've been really very fortunate to have Qian Wang as our ESIP fellow. And you'll be hearing about her work in the session today. So I did want to just kind of start off with our goal for today, that we're looking really to create this framework, and it's based on an ESIP Federation, an ESIP meeting that we had a couple of sessions ago, the ecosystem of innovation, and we're really looking for mechanisms, developing a framework for bringing data that comes out of our ESIP community from the various clusters and can factor into this pathway to show it to end users, get their feedback, and get their operational readiness level, trusted seal of approval, and training, all of these steps that are needed to move data into the hands of people, especially when they're working in all phases of the disaster life cycle. Today we'll be focused on what's happening during the disaster, and this we've been really focusing on wildfires for the last couple of years, and you'll hear a little bit more about our series, but we're now looking at what happens when the fire is occurring and what to do about it. From both the perspective of the communities and the responders who are providing information directly in response to the fire, as well as supporting people in actions that they need to take. So I did want to mention that we want to get a lot of feedback from everybody who is here in the room and virtually. We'll be using chat, and we also will have Slido, and we want to really encourage you to submit both questions, comments, and as we go through, we have 2 breakout sessions, your takeaways from those discussions. Everybody can contribute to it, as well as to the Google Docs. Please feel free to add your comments as well as signing in there. So I think at this point I'd like to turn it over to Dave Jones, and he's going to be talking about our first part of the session and invite some of our guest speakers today. Dave.
Thanks, Karen, and hi, everybody. I hope lunch was fulfilling, but not so fulfilling your eyes kind of close up. I think this is going to be a very dynamic session. We have a lot to talk about with wildfires, and we have a few slides here that I just wanted to show. First of all, please keep your cell phones silent if possible. And those of you online, if you, I guess everybody's muted, I'm not sure, but if you could just mute yourself online, and then when you're ready to speak, just unmute. And thanks for signing into the Google Doc. I see it being populated very diligently. We really appreciate that. Any comments or thoughts that you have that you would like to put into the Google Doc, there are places for that. So you can just scroll down a little bit and enter questions, or say, hey, I'm really curious about this. Can you follow up? The Disaster Lifecycle Cluster within the ESIP Federation, we meet every month, and we'll have a little thing at the end. We meet every month, every Thursday, first Thursday of each month at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So we really hope that you will join us in our conversations as we put these prototype products, identify prototype products, and get them into a pipeline for potential evaluation for operational organizations. So I just want to set the context a little bit here for wildfires. We are going to ask some Slido questions, and this is what we would like everybody to participate in right now. There's the QR code for the Slido poll, and there's a link also that you can get to. Now, can everybody, there's a Slido link is also in the Google Doc that you can click on. The first thing we want to know is, where do you get wildfire information? This is just a question for you as a citizen. You know, where do you get wildfire information? And we'll let you answer that question, and then we'll go to the second question. And Sean, I think you advance it, right, when we're ready, or no?
I could share my screen to show the result.
Maybe we could show it at the end. We'll show it at the end. Yeah.
Okay. So first the question is activated. So
Actually, maybe if you could share your screen, that would be good, because is that possible?
yeah, it is possible.
Okay. So I would have to display that too somehow, so everybody could see it. This is important because there's a real diversity of information available across many agencies and organizations that the public has to access when it comes to wildfire information. So this is your responses coming up in real time. See news channels, weather apps, wildfire map, CAL FIRE, NOAA, Sentinel-1 for data if you want to go look at satellite imagery, NASA, Worldview, InsuWeb. Look at all these sources. And a lot of people consider all of them as trusted sources. And we're going to be talking about that during this session here. So I think we have 19 inputs. There's a few more people that are typing in. We'll just give it another minute. This is great. It creates this word cloud that we can use later in our presentations just to show inputs from where wildfire data comes from. Information, that is. And as Karen mentioned, our session in the winter meeting focused on identifying trusted data sets before the wildfire starts. This summer meeting is talking about information on during the wildfire, when the wildfire breaks out, what kind of trusted sources are available. And then the winter meeting in January is going to talk about post-wildfire data and how we can put that to work and what kind of trusted sources, because there are all sorts of hazards that move through that whole stage that impact people very differently. Okay, so we have 23 inputs. There's another person typing, so we can go to the next poll. How do you decide whether to trust wildfire information? So this is the next poll in Slido. How do you decide? It's open for any sort of input. These are all great inputs that you have, that you're putting in. It's terrific. I love real-time word clouds. It's awesome. Okay, I'll give you about 30 more seconds. If you finish up, we'll go to the third question. And we're asking these before the session, just so we can see where we stand with what your expectations are with data and wildfire data. And as this is finishing up, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Dave Jones. I'm the CEO of Storm Center Communications. We're a small business located in Maryland, and we do a lot of work with NOAA and NASA and some other agencies and organizations to share data across platforms in real time, in a real-time collaborative environment called GeoCollaborate. And so we're using GeoCollaborate as the foundation for our ESIP ecosystem of innovation to deliver data sets in real time in a collaborative environment. And our plan is to do that into communities so we can bring them more trusted data in an operational sort of situational awareness environment. And we'll be talking about that. Okay, the third question now. And this is the last one before we hop into our little overview and then get into our presenters. What data could help during the wildfire stage? So you can include risk perception, vulnerability, things like that. What data can help during the wildfire stage? You might ask, help what? Help anything, whatever comes to your mind. Snacks, I love it. We just had lunch. That's great. That's a great thing about ESIP. Everybody has a great sense of humor. Okay, let's take 30 more seconds. Crowdsourcing at its best. If that snacks gets bigger, we know that more people want snacks. So. And for all the speakers that are online that'll be presenting today, we're capturing all this data and information and be happy to share it with you after, if you're not taking screen grabs of it. So it's really fascinating. Okay, Sean, we can end the poll and capture that information. That's great. So I'm going to move on here to the next.
Do you want to share screen? Share your screen.
Oh, click share my screen. Okay. Okay, so just a little background for our roadmap here in the disaster lifecycle cluster, and just to tell you so far in 2022 what's happened. There's been, and this is as of yesterday, 36,877 wildfires that have burned over 5 million acres. As we look back over the years, fewer wildfires are burning at this time of year, but burning more acreage. So we're seeing larger, more intense wildfires. More than 33,000 of these wildfires were caused by people. Many people think that lightning causes most wildfires, but it's people. And the cause of that from people are loss or control of debris burning, unattended and improperly extinguished or non-extinguished campfires. Sparks or heat transfer from the use of vehicles and equipment like chainsaws or recreational vehicles, including trailers. Even a couple of years ago, there was a major wildfire in California started by a gender reveal party, where they set off some explosives, and it caused one of the biggest wildfires in California history. That wildfire was eclipsed the next year in its size. Let's see here. So this is just an example of, this is a screen grab of the GeoCollaborate dashboard showing yesterday all of the heat warnings and watches, advisories that were issued by the National Weather Service. And then we did a real-time population extraction from CDAC, Socioeconomic Data Application Center. We just drew a circle, or drew a polygon around those advisories, and it was 40+ million people are impacted by this particular heat wave that's going on in the Midwest right now. And so we're utilizing GIS technology, connection to services to NASA data center, and also live data services feeds from NOAA to pull all this together, these disparate data sources in a single collaborative common operating picture. So Karen talked about our goal, and I just want to reiterate it as well, that our goal is to create a framework to enable communities and responders to connect to trusted data. It's not happening today. Everybody has maybe an app, everybody has something that they know of, some super web address that they can look at that they think has everything, but it doesn't have everything that they need. And so we want to connect to this trusted data, deliver it to communities about their areas in order to enable them to assess risk and accelerate actions when hazards develop, starting with wildfires. And so we've had a multi-year strategy here within ESIP, and you'll see during the course of this session that we're leveraging the expertise of ESIP clusters as well. And for those of you that are relatively new to ESIP, ESIP clusters are pretty awesome. You know, ESIP is a community-driven organization. So any one of you here could start a cluster. You could say, hey, I'm going to start a cluster on topic X, and if the community wants to participate, they will come to your cluster, and then you'll start to have monthly meetings or bi-monthly meetings or whatever you want to do. So we've had the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster for a number of years, and in January 2021, we had a session on California burning, putting data to work. And what came out of that session was pretty amazing. There's a lot of data out there, and not many people knew about all the different data sets that were popping up. And so in the summer meeting of 2021, Karen and the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster and I put our heads together and said, you know what, we can create this ESIP ecosystem of innovation because we have the plumbing to deliver the data in a real-time collaborative environment already. So why don't we utilize that capability to come up with products and services within ESIP and put them in front of decision makers and do it on an accelerated basis? You know, some technology incubators and things like that take years to boil up products and put them in front of people. We can do it really quickly from within ESIP. Then in January 2022, when we developed our roadmap, we had our first session on pre-wildfire. This one in July of 2022 is during wildfire. And then January of 2023 is going to be post-wildfire risks. You know, when there's a burn scar out there, it changes the entire dynamics, the hydrophobicity of the ground. And it's almost like when a rainstorm comes, it can be hitting cement. And so the flash flood guidance changes tremendously in areas that have been impacted by wildfires. And this isn't just within 6 months of the wildfire. This is years after the wildfires put out. The flash flood guidance changes dramatically and puts a new burden on the Weather Service and those folks to issue the right watches, warnings, and advisories. So what we're going to have today is this introduction here, but then we're going to go to Ed Kearns, who was a former chief data officer for NOAA and the Department of Commerce. Ed's now the CDO for First Street Foundation. He's going to talk about their wildfire risk and communication. And then we have Heath Hockenberry, who's on the line and just recovering. So we're really glad he's been able to join us today. He may have a couple of coughs in his talk, but we'll just look at that as value-add sound effects. Heath is a Weather Service meteorologist and a fire weather expert and fire weather program manager for the Weather Service. Then we have Everett Hinckley, who's with the U.S. Forest Service, National Remote Sensing Program Manager. Everett works with Vince Ambrosia very closely from NASA Ames, and they co-chair the TFRSAC, which is the Tactical Fire Remote Sensing Advisory Committee, which is composed of multiple federal agencies, 18, the last meeting I attended, and they talk about how they can get new technologies into the wildfire domain to help with the fighting. Then we're going to have a breakout session in the room here. We're going to break out into groups, and online we're going to have a couple of breakout rooms for you guys to participate as well and come up with some use cases where wildfire data can be used. And I see in here it says pre-wildfire, but that's not right. It's during wildfire. We have so many people reviewing this PowerPoint, and we find a mistake when we're live. That's okay, no problem. Then we're going to have some 15-minute for report outs for everybody. Then we're going to have a presentation from Xian in the room here, who's not only an ESIP fellow, but she's going to be getting her PhD at the end of the year. No pressure. From the University of South Carolina. No pressure. So from the University of South Carolina, Xian's study is on wildfire smoke impacts on COVID-19 cases and deaths in California. Then we have Jonathan Bruno, who is joining us live online from Colorado. He's the CEO of Coalitions and Collaboratives. Jonathan's been working for more than 20 years, working boots on the ground with communities to help them become more resilient to wildfires. And when I say more resilient, they can help plan prescribed burns. They can put up fences in riverbeds to help big boulders from rolling down and causing debris flows from impacting towns to all sorts of mitigation activities. And it's really interesting because they've identified a gap, and that gap has to do with the availability of data in these communities that they work with. Then we're going to have another breakout session during wildfire, talking about data to knowledge products during wildfire. So you can see how we come up with ideas as we break out into smaller groups, which is really exciting. And then we'll have a report out for that as well. And then we'll round this out with presentations from some ESIP clusters. So we're really fortunate to have a couple of them in person. Steve Young is here. He's going to talk about the air quality cluster, what they're doing with wildfire smoke. Envirosensing cluster, Eric Rowell. We'll see if his presentation gets uploaded. If it doesn't, we'll make it available after the session. And then data readiness, Douglas Rao, we have that one on hand here. Douglas is actually conducting a session right next to us, so he couldn't be in two places at one time. And I said, yes, you can. And then we have information quality cluster. Zhong Liu is here. And so we really appreciate the chair of the information quality cluster to give us some input on what they're doing with information quality. And then community resilience. Jonathan Blythe is here, and we really appreciate that because we see a strong tie with community resilience with the advances and the plans that we have in the disaster lifecycle cluster to connect with communities. And then we're going to round out the talk from David Green, the NASA Applied Sciences Wildfire Program Manager. And we have here Shana McLean, who's the Disasters Program Manager for NASA, but we have Maggie Glasgow on the line, who's going to give Shana's presentation. And Maggie has been a long-time ESIP participant. We're really happy to have her as part of this. So what you see here is the ESIP ecosystem of innovation. You've heard us talk about it a little bit. It's kind of a crowded diagram, I guess, but you can see the clusters on the left-hand side. whether the clusters have data services that they want to offer. They have widgets, we just call them widgets. Then we can test those in the disaster lifecycle cluster and deliver them out to all of these different organizations, including like DHS, the state of Florida, NASA, NOAA, the Weather Service. We can put these products in front of these organizations to see if they would be valuable for consideration in future products. And if it comes back where they are interested, then it gives more fuel, excitement, and credibility to these organizations that are wanting to develop these products, and can give them a little boost to continue to develop these. And so this is a question to think about. We're not going to have this poll right now, but what data could help during the wildfire stage? And so is this something we're going to ask again as you think about what you've seen in the session? And so without further ado, Ed, I'm going to introduce you. I just mentioned Ed Kearns, who is the Chief Data Officer for First Street Foundation. And Ed, I'd like you to come on board. Please share your knowledge, and we appreciate you being a part of it. Ed, I think, is on vacation, so he said he could join us, and so that's really a great sense of determination to share his work with us here at ESIP. So I'm going to stop sharing, right? Do I stop sharing? Okay. And then Ed, I'll ask you to take the role and share your screen, and it's all yours. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you for the invitation today. Let's see, hopefully you can see that screen. I'll go to full screen on that. Great, fantastic. So it's great to be back at ESIP, even as a virtual participant this time, but really do appreciate being here. And I'll tell you about what we're doing at First Street Foundation regarding wildfire risk. So just in general with climate risk today, as we all know, one of the problems of facing us is getting actionable information, useful information, stuff we can pick up and go with. And at First Street, we've taken a run at this. We've been focusing on properties and on homes and on businesses, basically real estate, trying to take the climate risks and map them onto something that is very personal to all of us, is where we live. And so this is how we've gotten started. Many of you are familiar with a product called Flood Factor that we released 2 years ago. And so our attempt here was to say, hey, can we look at climate risk coming from flood? Can we boil this down to 3-meter resolution? Can we incorporate compound flooding? And can we put it out there in a way that is easily accessible, easily usable, and understandable? And we've made a lot of progress on that. And now what we're doing is we're taking on additional climate risks. So we launched a wildfire product in May of this year. And we have a heat product coming up in August, a little foreshadowing. We'll get to that soon. But I'll talk about wildfire today. And why do we choose wildfire next after flood? Well, flood's the most prevalent and expensive climate peril facing America today. Next up is, in terms of the rate at which the cost is increasing, is wildfire. These data are from Adam Smith at NCI, the $1 billion disasters program that you're all familiar with. And so it's very easy to justify taking on wildfire as our next challenge. So we use the same playbook that we use for what we call Flood Factor. We use this for what we're now calling Fire Factor, integrating both into a website called riskfactor.com. And the idea is we partner with leading experts. So we partner with a consortium out west called Pyrogents, and also with an engineering firm called ERIP. And so we're working with those folks on this problem. And then we use a lot of government open data, NOAA weather data, USGS elevation data, Forest Service fuels data, and we bring them all together. And we do everything in an open and transparent way. We are peer reviewing all of our research. As a nonprofit, we can afford to do this, right? We're putting everything out, all our cards on the table. Coming back to the question of trust is, right, we want these data to be trusted. They are sourced from open government data, but then they go through a process of integrating them into a hazard model and then putting them out in a new fashion that makes it more easily consumable. But that chain of trust has to be established. And so we're following things like using metadata standards. We're minting DOIs for our products and making sure that they're out there. And we're distributing data for free for research and non-commercial use with a number of, we have about I guess over 50 academics right now that we're partnering with. We have over 31 federal agencies that we've got data sharing agreements signed with, and so we're making some good progress with that. So I'll talk a little bit how we produce this data, and then a few words about what we've seen so far as response goes. And so we're starting with the U.S. Forest Service's Canonical Landfire data set, which gives us the fuels, vegetation types across the U.S. But the last time that was updated publicly was back in 2016, and so we had to augment that information with current fires, from the last 10 years. We had to update any fuel treatments, any fire breaks that have been cut, these kinds of things. And so we've updated Landfire into a 2021 basis. And then we took 10 years of NOAA weather data to provide a wide sample of possible weather conditions. And we basically ran a Monte Carlo simulation using a model called Elmfire, which I'll talk more about in a second. But it's this fire behavior model. We ran it under a whole bunch of different weather conditions over a 10-year time period to simulate every possible way that fires could burn across the landscape. And we use historical ignition locations to drive this. And then we took those results and then we did it again. We ran the model another 100 million times across all of CONUS, but we bias adjusted the weather time series for the kind of conditions we could expect using the CMIP5 climate models, what we could expect 30 years into the future. We picked 30 years for all our products because our tests have shown that's what most people, like the limit most people can think of in terms of looking over the horizon for like, a typical length of a mortgage, say. But it's a good number, but there's nothing stopping us from doing 50 or 100 years as well, but we're focused on the 30-year time period. So by running this model called Elmfire, which is distributed under the Eclipse public license, we run this in all these different types of conditions over and over and over again, and we build up a probabilistic map across the U.S. at 30-meter resolution. And so what we're left with after we run this model is we're left with a map of fire probability, whether that pixel will burn or not. The fire intensity expressed as flame length, and we track both a median and the maximum flame length, which goes to how hot the fire is going to be. And then Elmfire does have an ember spread component in it, so we do have some estimation of where embers are likely to go being cast out in front of the flaming front of these wildfires. And so what we're doing is creating a hazard map with these three components: fire probability, fire intensity, and ember spread. And then we roll that up into a score from 1 to 10 of what the likelihood is of fire exposure at that pixel. So if you have a 1, if you're scored as a 1, it's unlikely you're going to have wildfire. If you have a 10, it's extreme danger. And we do this for every property across the U.S. So in CONUS is about 143 million properties. So I like to say, if we can do it once, we can do it 143 million times. And that score is a 30-year aggregate estimate, by the way, too. So that incorporates climate change effects into that score. So after we've got the exposure, the estimate of exposure, then we look at every building, whether it's a home or a business, and we assess the vulnerability of that building. And we work with the engineering firm ERIP because it's done a lot of experimental work in this area. They're expert in this. So when we did this with flood to get to a financial impact of flood risk, the basic vulnerability for flood risk for a home or a building is how high the first floor is, above the base flood elevation. In this case, with wildfire, it's a little bit more complicated than that, right? Majority of homes actually burn down from the inside out. All sorts of things that I've learned about wildfire. Those of you that know me for a while know that I'm a physical oceanographer. So getting into wildfire, I have learned a lot during this process and working with these experts to create these products. But things like defensible space are things that we can measure from space or from aerial imagery. So we can measure that for every home, for every rooftop. Other things, we rely on machine learning and public records in order to try to discern roof types and such, and vent exposures, and whether windows are single or dual pane, these kinds of things. It's not a national database for window type, but we can use building codes and years built as a proxy for these a lot of times too. So we try to make our best educated guess at what the building characteristics are so we can assess the vulnerability. So this is a map of current national likelihood of wildfire across the U.S. Since we put this out, there's been a number of takeaways. So, we shared this data with the Forest Service. We've had a lot of discussions with them because they have a product out called Wildfire Risk to Communities, which is a lower resolution product which relates to relative wildfire risk. There are their product was created for a community scale preparation. What we're doing is a property scale risk assessment, so it's slightly different products in that way, but I think they're very complementary to one another. So we've had a lot of great discussion with Forest Service. They're being very, very helpful. With the general public, it's been really, really interesting because you can see the kind of patterns and they match up with historical exposures and losses. So of course, out west in California, Nevada, Arizona, but also Texas and Florida are hotspots, literally hotspots. But the general public, when we put our flood product out, for example, we have a user center where you can send in messages and emails and complaints if you want to, or compliments, but they're mainly complaints. With flood, the most common complaint we hear is you scored our house way too high. You said we were a 9 or we're a 10 on your scale, and there's no way our house is never flooded. It's never going to flood. That's kind of a typical response. And it usually goes if people are trying to sell their house and they're surprised by this and they're still coming to terms with it. With fire, it's been the exact opposite. It's been very interesting. The complaints that we're getting, and there's not that many, but there's a number of people have written in. They are all saying the same thing. They're saying, "Oh, you scored my house way too low. I have much higher fire risk than what you're saying." So I think it goes to the human psychology of wildfire. Because the likelihood of just a general home in America being lost to wildfire as opposed to flood is about an order of magnitude less, but the impact of wildfire in people's psyches is I think significantly different. Anyhow, the main thing is, no matter people are complaining or not, the good thing is they're becoming aware of what their wildfire risk is. They're becoming aware of climate risk, which is the nonprofit First Street Foundation's mission is to educate people, raise awareness, quantify climate risk, and make sure that this data is actionable. Where we're seeing the greatest increase in that risk over time, it's not out west. There is a lot of risk out west right now, but by and large, a lot of the emerging risk that's coming from climate change is in the southeast. And this is mainly due to higher air temperatures, impacting those existing forests, making the fuels in those forests drier and hotter, which increases their probability that they're going to burn. If they're going to burn, they're going to burn more frequently. And so yeah, it's very important, particularly from a fire suppression standpoint, that those fire teams in the east are ready for this kind of change that is coming their way. So we make this information available publicly for free at riskfactor.com. Trying to get this data out to as wide an audience as possible. So it's free, it's publicly available. With the federal agencies, we start with zero cost, but if any of you have ever tried to give anything free to the federal government, it involves a lot of lawyers. So usually a micro purchase on is a much easier way. Doing a data buy is a much easier way of delivering data to a government agency. And an interesting thing for this group at ESIP is the business model that we're trying to use at First Street, because we are, like I said, we're a nonprofit. We're entirely philanthropically funded. We're not an advocacy group other than advocating for the best data available. But what we're doing is we're using a Creative Commons non-commercial license to distribute these data. We're making our aggregate data available, like on AWS Open Data, making that available for free. But we are trying to find a way of having the value of the property-specific data and the hazard data that we've created, the value of that data to industry, we're trying to mine that in order to become self-sufficient, so that the value of the data that our donors have helped support to create can we get into a self-sustaining mode where we're selling licenses to insurance companies, to investment banks, to whoever on the industry side is interested in the data, and use that data to fund additional production and also the delivery of the data to the public. So it's going pretty well, but it is an interesting business model because it's not open data and it's not proprietary data. It's kind of walking the line right down through the middle. And where we're headed in that vein for a business model is that if you've gone to riskfactor.com before, you'll notice that for the hazard layers, there's a thing that says, "Hey, wait for Risk Factor Pro coming out." So this is a kind of a platform approach to provide access to the hazard layers that should be out in the end of October, and you can sign up for that. Again, it'll be free for your home. You can go in and register for it, but it'll get you access to those hazard layers and additional products. But that's also, we can also sell subscriptions to that same kind of service for commercial groups for commercial real estate. And we're hoping that's going to help fund this, the continued work going forward. And with that, Dave, I said I'd keep it under 10 minutes. I hope I did. Thank you very much. Dave, I can't hear you.
There we go. Thanks so much, Ed. There was a rounding applause in the room for you. You probably couldn't hear it. But,
Sure there was.
There was. Yeah. and so we're going to move on to Heath Hockenberry, but we hope that you're available at least, as I think you said, till 3 or 3:30.
Yeah.
That you can
and I'll come back after that too.
You can be a part of the breakout and really contribute. So thanks so much, Ed. This is really amazing and really beneficial. We're hoping to build a good partnership with you through ESIP and through the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster. So our next presenter is Heath Hockenberry, and Heath is a wildfire program manager with NOAA's National Weather Service. And I asked Heath to participate in this because he's really one of the leaders within the Weather Service trying to improve NOAA's services and service offerings from the Weather Service standpoint. So Heath, hopefully you can hear me, and the floor is yours.
All right, let's see if I can share my screen here. Everything coming through?
Yep, we can see you. We can see your camera, and I see your screen coming across. Yes.
Excellent.
It's all yours.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Yeah, well, from the applause to the boos, the cascading boos here. So hopefully not. So this picture is actually, I'm in that picture back to you with a burn at the Okefenokee Swamp. So where am I coming from? I'm coming from that Weather Service, federal government perspective of how we in the Weather Service, as part of NOAA, contribute to firefighter safety, primarily operations and resource management. So connected in pretty heavily with partners on a very localized basis. And that's why there's so many different flavors of ice cream, I would say, so many different combinations of warning services that we allow our FOs to do. So yeah, I'm going to move toward the next slide. We do have all sorts of partners at every local, regional, and national part of government. We do provide some direct services to states as well. And our primary partners that we have agreements with on the federal side are, of course, Forest Service, BLM, BIA.
Yeah, good.
Yep.
Good.
Everything okay?
Yeah, it's just it was black. Yeah.
Okay. Park Service, Fish, and then we do have specific agreements for services with Washington, Oregon, California, and Texas. We can serve every state though, but we usually seek a federal partner for federal to federal provision of services. So what do we provide during and right before wildfire? So our warning services are probably the most visible part. The red flag warning is a National Weather Service. It is our way of communicating fire weather conditions that could lead to extreme fire behavior. We do our best to coordinate with the overall services from the Storm Prediction Center. It's the closest thing we have to a national center that focuses on fire weather operations. We don't have anything like a hurricane center or a water center that does this. So we really rely on SPC to give those general outlooks. And then at a very local level, we translate those into red flag warning services. It might be not so difficult to believe that we have over 500 across the nation, including Alaska and Oconus and the territories. That is because we provide that flexibility for local users to specify those conditions that they look for, whether it be wind gusts at night, humidity recoveries, dispersion information, anything that they feel needs to be incorporated into the extreme fire behavior puzzle as they put the pieces together. So are we making efforts to streamline those 500 different types of criteria? Yes, we are. We're working with the Desert Research Institute to come up with more of a matrix approach and a more standardized methodology. But we have to slowly get into that so that we can compare our red flag services, what we're doing now, compared to what could be a more standardized and consistent methodology for red flag warnings. So we're slowly studying it and slowly moving it into an operational setting. Now, what you have to realize about red flag warning services is that they are issued for weather conditions and fuels. They do not treat the fire on the ground as part of the warning process. So quite unlike tornadoes, which are imminent or occurring, or hurricanes that are immediately making landfall, we are only focused on weather conditions that could lead to a wildfire. We're not trying to explicitly predict the wildfire or its movement. It's just not something that the Weather Service is even in law supposed to be doing. We are a weather organization primarily, but with our decision support services, we are more than open to partnering with other parts of NOAA, other partners to get information out through our dissemination services. So our role within the government and in the public services may change based on laws passed by Congress. Again, that is to be seen, but we are still investing quite a bit of time and effort and even funding into the wildfire problem in terms of improving forecast services. Another thing that we do in the absence of actually going out to a fire is that we provide spot forecasts for wildfires. Prescribed fire is our biggest workload. We do about 60 to 70% of these spot forecasts for prescribed fire. We also service other areas like marine spills and hazmat, search and rescue. And what we do is we get a forecast over this web interface and we turn it around generally in 30 minutes or less back to the incident. We do about 25,000 on average annually. Last year, we did over 31,000 spot forecasts in 2021. And a lot of these forecasts are actually required as part of the prescribed fire management plan. So these forecasts, once they're done, are available in a monitoring status off of our spot forecast page. So viewing where spots are coming in from is possible. Now, who can request a spot forecast? The key part of that policy is making sure that whoever is requesting it will certify that they are requesting it and they are a public safety official in defense of life and property. So we can't issue a spot forecast for an event that doesn't have a public service official involved protecting life and property. That's our dividing line of services there. When fires get big, about 140 times a year on average, we actually go out to the fires. That's me again giving a briefing to an incident staff. My dad is a preacher, so I'm not holding a Bible there, but I'm reminded of him when I see that picture of myself. But it's one of the few I have of me in action. We support the team. We assure the fire team's safety. We assist with equipment, getting it in and out. We even turn into snow forecasters at the end of the year. We serve as the incident's primary focal point for weather information. Everyone out there in the crowd has a smartphone, has an app, has a favorite go-to source of information. But when it comes to decisions or making heads of maybe conflicting information, heads or tails, we provide that kind of service on the fire. We also do the daily briefings so that the crews that don't have the fancy tools can actually get a verbal briefing, a verbal forecast, and to make sure that they know that there's a weather person watching their backs when they're out in the middle of nowhere fighting fires over radio. So that's what IMET services are all about. I won't steal too much thunder because I know there's a lot of remote sensing topics with Everett and the remote sensing group. But we do have NOAA support and JPSS and GOES-R for new fire detections, and the fire detection world is huge. And I kind of liken it to the advent of radar, being able to see fires in real time as they grow and how much radiative power they're putting out. So JPSS provides the highest resolution, but a couple of snapshots a day, and GOES-R is a continuous monitor at about a 2 to 3 kilometer resolution. All right, rapid refresh smoke. This model became operational early last year, I believe.
Hey,
and
Heath?
Yes.
Just one question. Your slides stopped advancing. I was wondering, we're stuck on the site-specific fire weather services.
Oh, I'm seeing the slides move.
You are? Okay.
Yes.
Can you stop sharing and just share again? There you go.
All right, I just stopped.
Okay. And then
start it
up
again. I'm
again.
going to change my connection here to hopefully what's going to be.
No worries.
Or I can share it and you can let me know when you want to move to the next one.
Oh, he's bringing it back up, so we have it too. Yep, just in case, Heath, we have it brought up here now, so we can advance it if you just want to let us know. Heath may have dropped. There he is. He's here. Okay.
Yeah, it's working.
Okay. Now we see it, Heath, and you're on the HRR smoke animation.
Okay. Yeah, in the interest of time, I won't backtrack too much. Hopefully my words came across.
Yep,
but
they did.
Yeah. The high resolution rapid refresh smoke is available online as well, and it kind of represents a pretty nice advantage and advancement in fire weather in terms of the smoke output. So these various fields, they identify the fires and provides air quality and even visibility forecasts. The high split tool run by NOAA ARL can track dispersion. This is an example of the high split showing the dispersion near the campfire in California. And it does incorporate the air chemistry model and the community multi-scale air quality model. I did want to talk a little bit about the future and what we're investing in and where we see fire weather and the Weather Service going on the scale at the top, from months to weeks to days, to where we are with ignition and fire support, where we would like to go as we make advancements and continue strengthening our interagency partnerships, our fire scale warnings, and incorporating those detections into the warning process. Couple models, probabilistic lightning forecasts, moving away from the deterministic world, even though everyone likes the deterministic information, the how to use the probability of lightning and new ignitions and initial attack would be an area of focus. And then constantly updated fuel status along with historical backgrounds within a robust cloud visualization tool. And I know that there's people on this call that are all about visualization tools and how to best incorporate all this information into one location. I did want to show, maybe to close this out, a couple of websites. We do have within the Weather Service an experimental, hopefully we'll be transitioning to permanent, the Graphical Hazards Weather Outlook that provides kind of a color chart of threats as we move through the week, a 10,000 foot level. This is an example of a heat risk graphic, along with the different weather elements and the 24-hour hazard risks. Definition of risk is pretty important, and we're exploring that as an organization. And the second things that we've been doing, this is a nice thing called a fire weather dashboard that was developed in our Duluth, Minnesota office. It provides a clickable map where you can go in and see all sorts of gridded weather information from our digital database that's important to fire. Wind directions every hour here, mixing heights, transport winds, even arrow depictions and color coding of critical levels that are reached. Is it in a red category? Is it in a green category for ventilation rate and Haynes index, for example? Now you might say Haynes index shouldn't be calculated hourly, but that's a whole other discussion. If it's available in our grids, though, we can put it out here. And then, of course, there's graphs of wind gusts and relative humidity. So all this kind of information during a wildfire is available. Some of it's kind of under the hood and quote, super secret. If you're an IMET, you're out there serving the incident itself, but spot forecasts and these weather graphics that are out there that we're putting out are available. And I think I will end right there, hopefully generating a number of questions at the end.
Thanks so much, Heath.
Right.
That was great, and thanks for sticking around as well. We're going to pull up Everett Hinckley's presentation. Everett's he's an amazing guy. He works in the Geospatial Management Office at the U.S. Forest Service, and he says, "Yeah, Dave, sure, I can do this presentation. I got a busy day, but I can do it." And he was fortunate enough to record his presentation because he's working on some testimony that's going to go in front of Congress. I think for his boss. So we have that presentation in a PowerPoint play, which is a video. It's the first time I've seen the actual, you need PowerPoint to play it, and it's not an MP4 file. So John is bringing that up right now, and she'll play this, and then we'll head into our breakout session. By the way, just as a little note, I don't know what time is it now? 3:05. We're going to target we have a 5-minute break scheduled just to let us stretch and all that stuff. We're going to time it for 3:30 when the coffee break happens. So you'll have time to go out, and even though we love interactivity and a lot of talking to each other within ESIP, we ask you to just grab your coffee and come back in because we have a lot more to do and talk about to get through this 3-hour session. So without further ado, we'll start Everett's presentation. we got to put the microphone by the speaker of the PC. Stand by.
You can. I know.
That's good.
Can you hear it?
There's nothing online though.
No.
And right after this, we'll have experience in working with the PowerPoint video.
Can you hear us? Can you hear the presentation?
Can you hear the
Try
presentation?
again.
I can hear it online. I can hear it online. Oh yeah.
So the online audience can hear it. So the tech support will be here in 2 minutes. They can't hear it now. So the tech support will be here in 2 minutes. Yep.
Okay.
Perfect. Hey, we're having a online PowerPoint and it's like this, and the online audience can't hear it. Oh,
I'm gonna stop the share real quick. So it's this PowerPoint, right?
yes.
That has auto, like,
Yeah,
advancing.
yeah.
Cool. Here we go. Share screen. Share this. Okay.
Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to figure out Everett's audio problem, but we're going to go into our breakout session. And then when we come out of the breakout session, it'll be time for the break. So, right? So that'll work out. Karen, do you want to talk about the breakout or at all?
Yes, I think we have about 18 people online, or 15. So probably break them into 2 groups. Do you think 2 groups would be good online? Yeah. And then, as we had mentioned before, if we could ask you to kind of group into quarters, well, looks like if people
I'm the
would,
co-chair of 2 working groups. The Tactical Fire Remote Sensing Advisory Committee is a community of practice on the unclassified.
oh, okay. Maybe there's one group over here, but we have a couple of questions to address based on what we've heard thus far. And let's see if we can. Yeah, we would have that up on the screen, but the PowerPoint, yeah.
I'm not touching anything. That was.
Bob said they could hear you. Whatever you were just doing.
Yep. And we'll share that screen. There. Share. Okay. And do you want me to play this now or?
I think we're going to do the breakdown.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you're ready for this to go, click on the like PowerPoint.
So apologies for technical difficulties here. So we'll play the video afterwards, but our first breakout, we're looking at some of the use cases for the wildfire as it's happening, and what are the risks to people in the vicinity for both fire and smoke. And so the question will come up there on the screen in a moment, but what are the challenges for data access and use during wildfires? So kind of addressing the kinds of challenges that occur. And I don't know, there we go. Dave, do you want to say a word about the New Mexico Wildfire Report?
Sure. For those of you that may know about the New Mexico wildfire called the Hermit's Peak Fire, it was started as a prescribed burn. And so the Forest Service had prescribed this burn. They had the officials out there to start the wildfire on April 6th. And shortly after starting that fire, it wasn't called a wildfire at that time, it was a prescribed burn, winds picked up, it got out of hand, and over the course of a couple of weeks, it became New Mexico's largest wildfire in their history. It burned thousands of structures, ruined a lot of lives, and there's a lot of effort going in right now to investigate, who's going to pay for this. So there was a report put together by the chief of the Forest Service, and we put that report in our folder, or we'll share it in the ESIP site. And one of the things that he said was really striking. He said the pace of climate change is changing how fire behaves, and we don't understand how that fire is going to behave because of climate change. And he also said in this report that fire behavior is outpacing our modeling capability. So we now have very strong and intense wildfires that are burning. We have drought, we have heat, and we have fires that are behaving like nobody's ever seen before. So there's a lot of effort. Hence this session at ESIP here as well, because we think that ESIP members have a lot to offer that we might be able to bring to bear to put in front of decision makers, to put in front of communities for what they might consider as potential, trusted data sources, or at least get on a track to put this data in line for consideration for products and services that might be put together by agencies. And so this particular breakout, we just want to freely talk with each other and identify in the We're using the Slido? Yeah. So we're using the Slido here to put in your thoughts and of the challenges for data access and use. And we're saying during wildfires, because we want to identify during wildfire what are the challenges. But you can think of what are the challenges, period, you know, whether it's wildfire related or not, for data access and use. Because we want to gather this information so we can provide an approach for communities to use trusted data from our ESIP ecosystem of innovation.
Okay, well, let's go ahead then and get into breakout groups. Just kind of maybe gather around in the three corners.
Just turn around, talk to your neighbors, and then start to introduce introduce yourself, but also enter this data into the Slido.
We have 2 rooms. Oh, yep. I can. Yeah, I'll talk. Oh, did we create 3 on top of each other? Sorry, let me.
Okay, we're going to start back up here. Thanks so much for coming back. I know. We had snacks in the Slido, but no snacks in the coffee break. So it's called a curveball. Okay, so thanks so much for coming back into the room after the coffee break. I just wanted to put up on the screen here some of the results of the Slido, and it looks like it's there's some random things in there, but also what came up are trusted sources, and they can't always keep up with the pace of the fire. This is a challenge. And also getting bandwidth into the wildfire area is always a challenge as well. There are technologies out there. There are balloons that can hover at high altitudes and provide bandwidth. There are some large and small companies working on that type of technology. And, joining people together is a big challenge. And that's what we're hoping to help bring to the table through the ESIP ecosystem of innovation, and that is connecting multiple people at the same time, looking at the same data on the same map. It's one thing to point people to a website or two, but they typically don't want to navigate through a lot of things on a website. So extracting trusted data as services and bringing them into a collaborative environment takes away the burden of decision makers to have to go and find data. And if it can be put in front of them, then they can work on analysis and making decisions. One of the things that we did at Storm Center is we did some research on data, people who use data in analysis for their jobs. And it turns out that in a specific use case, analysts were spending 80% of their time looking for data, 20% of their time using the data to make a better prediction or outlook or report. So data discoverability and putting it to use is really critical. And one of the things we're finding is that if you're a subject matter expert that has located different data sets from disparate sources, you can control what gets put in front of everybody, and so you have a human in the path, but it's relevant data that you're displaying for people. So thank you for those of you online that are still connected, and we're going to be getting to Jonathan Bruno here right after we have a presentation from Sean, and Sean is going to be right. You're next. Sean is going to be talking about wildfire smoke and its impact on COVID-19 cases and deaths in California. So it's really great that we're able to take the expertise of our ESIP fellows and enable them to present professionally to all of you. So you'll probably hear this is part of her dissertation for the next 10 minutes, but also, no, it's not her dissertation.
It's not a dissertation.
No, but so Sean, thanks so much for contributing across the board in ESIP.
Thanks for inviting me. So actually, it's not my dissertation. My dissertation is about age and spatial disparity of COVID-19. And this is wildfire smoke is one of the projects I'm very interested in. So I did this like 1 year ago about wildfire smoke impact on COVID-19 outcomes, a preliminary analysis in California. So I know there are like a lot of wildfire professionals are here. So I do want to hear about like some feedback about this project. I am Qian Huang, a PhD candidate at the University of South Carolina, and I'm working with Dr. Susan Cutter at the Hazard and Vulnerability Research Institute, and I am also a research assistant at the Center for Rural and Primary Healthcare in School of Medicine. So I do geography and public health at the same time. Yes, let's start with it. So infectious diseases are a major worldwide and ominous public health concern. The Great Influenza in 1918 killed like 20 to 50 million people, and the most recent AIDS pandemic killed like 35 million people since the first detected in 1981, and of course the COVID pandemic. And as of this week, there are 562 million people infected and killed 6 million people globally. So it's a big number. And of course, economic impact is significant economic impact. The American Hospital Association estimated $200 billion in 2022, the financial loss. So, and wildfire air, like the smoke, gases, dust from the burning of plants, wood, building, and other materials. I know like a lot of people already know this before. And the pollutant contains greenhouse gases, methane, nitrous oxide, and particulate matter, and it changes weather conditions and the environment, creating a hazardous situation for human health. Right, and of course, wildfire and the public health has like very tight relationship. Like it causes initial morbidity and mortality, and mental health, like depression, trauma after that, and like for students, probably the school closed, and the student will get trauma after the wildfire events, and childhood asthma. And 4.2 million premature death per year from lung cancer, cardiovascular disease, chronic respiratory problem, and especially during COVID-19 time, the respiratory disease, like the wildfire smoke, will like decrease the body of ability to fend out pathogens. So this study is to examine the effect of wildfire-aligned pollutant on the dynamic of confirmed COVID-19 cases, death, and testing in California in 2020. So it describes the daily pattern of newly confirmed COVID-19 outcome and compare them with air quality changes, analyze how the outcomes are related to air quality index. So my study area, California, this is like overall description of that year's wildfire. So it burned over 4.2 million acres and like over 9,000 incidents and 33 fatalities, over 10,000 structures damaged and destroyed. And in 2020, California has a total number of 2.5 million COVID cases and 33,000 deaths. The data and method, so The daily county level data of COVID-19 outcomes are from California Health and Human Service Agency, and the wildfire incidence data. Actually, I emailed the file manager of California Cal Fire, and she emailed me back and sent me all wildland fire incidents, a CSV file, county level, and in the specific study period. So that helps a lot. And air quality index EPA, from EPA. So that is, I know a lot of study use the PM 2.5 and other data. So, but the AQI has almost covers the pollutant contained from the wildfire smoke. So I choose to use air quality index to measure the smoke impact. And for software well, I use ArcGIS and SPSS to do the correlation. And here is the table for AQI index. The green is from 0 to 50, which means good, and then moderate, unhealthy, very unhealthy, and hazardous. It runs from 0 to like 300 and higher. This is the descriptive results of the wildfire incidents, the data I got from Cal Fire. And in 2020, there are total wildland fire incidents are over 16,000, and total anchored burn is 3.7 million acres. And incidents burned over 300 acres is 110. And the fire service injured 64, fatality 1, and the pie chart is the fire causes. So we can see the natural source is like 3%, smoking 2%, equipment 7%, and debris vegetation burning 7%, and there is a huge amount of undetermined, 43%. That is a huge problem, because if we want to prevent wildfire, we have to know why, like how it caused and why it happened. So if there is a huge amount of wildfire incidents, it's undetermined, it's hard to prevent that, right? And this is the wildfire incidents GIS map I made. So the left one is a wildland fire burned area, the percentage. So it's the burned acres divided by county acres and multiply with 100. So it's a percentage of wildfire burn area of that 110 events. So this 110 events like burned over 300 acres, and it just covered most of the event, the burn area. So we can see the left one is the percentage burned as pretty high. The most one is the highest one is 78%. So even though it's like multiple times, but it's still very high. And the right one is the average air quality index. It's from like 30 to 106, like really high. It's the average air quality index value for that county during the study period. And we can see the Southern and Eastern California has like very like serious air quality problem. And this one is, let me move here a little bit. So this figure showed the daily new cases, daily new death, and daily new tests, and daily average AQI from February 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2020. And we can see the highest one, the bottom highest top is when August complex happened and burned over 1 million acre area at that time. And this is a COVID-19 case rate, death rate, and the test rate by county in California from the study period. And the case rate it's like the COVID-19 case rate in California, the eastern, actually the southern part is pretty high. And death rate is kind of similar. but it has a little bit like the middle part is very high there, and the testing rates is kind of different. It's like more spread out. And Lansing is still very, it has a pretty good test rate. And so this is a descriptive analysis of the average air quality index value and COVID-19 outcomes of 58 counties in California. And the case rates in that year is over 5,000 cases per 100,000 population, and death rate is 57 per 100,000 population. Test rate is like pretty high. And this is a cumulative, average cumulative case, death, and tests. So, and I did run a correlation between the average AQI and the COVID-19 exposures to see by county to see whether they're significantly correlated or they're not significantly correlated. So from my result, you can see the AQI is positively significantly correlated with the case rates, death rates, and the kind of negative, but like not significantly correlated with the test rate, which means more like higher AQI, more cases, like higher case rates and higher fatality rates, and more cumulative cases, more death, and more tests. But the testing rates is like negative. It's even though it's not significant, it's still negative, which means the bad air quality will like impede the testing facilities running. And here is the bivariate map of the COVID-19 outcomes and AQI. The left one is the case rate and AQI, middle is death, and the right is testing. So we can see the darker means the darker place need more attention about, because they have like both higher case rate and both like bad air quality. So it's still the middle place there. And for death, it's the middle, it's like the Southern California places has like pretty need more attention about the COVID-19 impacts and out quality at the same time. So in conclusion, the average air quality index are positively and significantly correlated with COVID-19 outcomes in 2020, and the wildland fire smoke may exacerbate the impact of COVID-19. So the government should like implement the mitigation action to lower the occurrence, of course, like improve the air quality and enhance the awareness in preparation and response to natural hazard, especially wildfire during the COVID-19 pandemic. And the allocation of testing capacity should consider the wildfire. And of course, the at-home tested case helped a lot because people don't have to go to the testing place to get tested. And then more public health attention is needed in the counties for high AQI and high case mortality rates places, right? And the should encourage people get vaccination, things like that, the mitigation and preparedness. So future direction. So I have the incidence data for the 16,000 incidents, wildfire incidents in California for 2020. So I could analyze the differences between fire weeks and non-fire weeks for each county, and also do like add more variables like urban, rural area, and social vulnerability, human mobility, and access to healthcare service and mitigation actions to further analyze the wildfire smoke impact on COVID-19. That's it. Thank you.
John, this is great. Thanks so much. We're going to keep moving into the next presentation, but Sean's work looking at smoke, we have a new visualization capability from the operational NOAA model, the HER smoke model. It's the high resolution rapid refresh smoke model two parameters are output from that regarding smoke. One is the near surface smoke, which is about forecasted about 8-meter level, where you can see the concentrations of smoke and where that's moving. I think that might play a really good role in future research with where that smoke is heading and how it's forecast and what happens with exposure and certainly things like that. So that leads me into our next speaker, which is Jonathan Bruno, who is the Chief Executive Officer from Coalitions and Collaboratives. Jonathan's coming to us live from Colorado. And one of the conversations that we've had over the last several months is with Jonathan and his organization and groups on the ground, what are they finding from working with communities? And one of the things that they're finding is that there's a need for data and to put more data to use. And boy, what's the theme of ESIP's meeting out here? Data for all people and making data matter. So this is a great evolving partnership with coalitions and collaboratives. And Jonathan, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Just to let you know, some connectivity issue here. So I wanted to say hello so you can see my face, but I'm going to stop my video to make it a little easier on my side. I'll come back in at the end of the presentation. So first off, it's an honor to share with you a bit about our work and our community's needs. Coalitions and collaboratives formed in 2014. We started working on collaborative conservation projects back in 1996 at the Coalition for the Upper South Platte. CUSP, as they're known, works within the Upper South Platte watershed. This watershed feeds Denver 85% of its drinking water. It's approximately 2,600 square miles. So back in 1998, water providers, managers, and citizens got together. Both out of
Jonathan, are you changing your slides? We are saying we're looking at the first slides of your presentation.
I did change my slide to show a helicopter. So if you can't see that, I think we might run into that issue we did with the other presenter. Can you guys put the slide up on your side?
Yes, I could.
I'll just request you to change. Yeah. We'll do that. I'm gonna stop sharing.
Yeah.
And it looks like audio is not clear as well. Such is the nature of working in remote areas in Colorado. Is that better for folks? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
We can hear you great now.
Okay, thank you.
Can you see the screen?
So yeah, that looks good. And if you could change the slide. Perfect. So back in 1998, water providers, land managers got together, both out of a necessity and a desire to protect one of the most important critical watersheds in Colorado. Our history has been filled with successes, triumphs, flames, and flood. The small map over here represents wildfires. This is a bit dated. You'll notice it's from 2010 is the extent of this. But every single one of those dots represents a wildfire here on the Colorado Front Range. The red represents 1,000 acres or more. One of the things that's really interesting is if you look just above the big Hayman fire, you'll see the Buffalo Creek fire. It blows my mind that this fire at 11,000 acres was the largest fire in Colorado's known or recent history. Fires nowadays seem to surpass 100,000 acres in one burn window. In 2002, the 137,000 acre Hayman fire set in motion much of my work. In those fateful days after the fire, CUSP began the long road to recovery, and I got to tell you, we're still working on it today. I consider wildfire or natural disturbances through the lens of the 4-quadrant emergency management cycle: mitigate, prepare, respond, and recover. However, I look at it through the muddied lens that my history and the history of the Upper South Platte has created. There's no clear line between any of the phases. Even after a fire is considered contained, the response phase continues as the floods at 3:30 in the morning will come. as the recovery phase ramps up and as FEMA and other assistance agencies step in, mitigation for the next event must seamlessly continue. I consider these disturbances as all one incident. You can change the slide. So in years of community within the Upper South Platte, the state and local partners reached out and said, how can you create a cusp for us? I consider myself a recovery. I'm a qualified engine boss, type 2 burn boss. I've responded to more than 100 fires across the country and here in Colorado. Over the years, I've asked myself, how are my actions in suppression changing the outcomes? I've returned to several areas over and over again to do the same thing I've done before. My answer is that suppression is needed, not changing the outcomes or moving the needle. More homes and lives are being lost. Watersheds and ecosystems are being altered for years to come. These people, these ecosystems are being negatively impacted by climate change. I believe we can do something. With that in mind, I focus my work on the actions we can take to become more resilient, more adaptive, happier, and healthier. COCO is founded on this belief. We're founded on the belief that the world's most complex problems can be solved on the ground. And the number one goal that we have is to help those doing the work. You can change the slide. So a bunch of words here, you can read this. One of the things that's really critical is that 4.7 billion is being spent annually on fire suppression, yet the annual spending on proactive fire, pre-fire mitigation and adaptation is in the millions. The biggest barrier to community fire adaptation is not motivation or a desire at a community level, it's local capacity. The fire world spent billions developing a state-of-the-art wildfire response infrastructure. Conversely, very little has been spent to maintain, strengthen a mitigation-focused infrastructure to support community wildfire risk reduction. Mitigation efforts are unorganized, spotty, starving for knowledge, training, and funding, and they continue to spend most of their time looking for the funds, relying on ineffective methods. One thing that's really important for all of you is to understand that wildfire impacts really devastates those on the edge. I think in the last presentation, we saw some of the impacts from smoke as it relates to public health. Elderly, disabled, and people of color are more likely to have medical conditions exacerbated by wildfire smoke. They often have lack of transportation, language barriers that can complicate evacuation, relocation, and access to aid. You can switch the slide. So in 2002, the Hayman Fire acted as a wake-up call. However, I got to tell you, I think we're still asleep at the wheel. Last Friday, I read this very sad and upsetting headline. We can't let our guards down. Flood risk persists after flash flood kills 2 people in Larimer County. Larimer County here in Colorado has been impacted by the Cameron Peak and East troublesome fires, and flash flooding and debris flows continue. This headline persists across the country, and I got to tell you, we know better. We have the information, we know the risk, yet we're not taking the seriousness of post-fire incidents the same as we do actual fire response. Most communities are not aware of the risks or what to do about it. Human and natural systems are connected. If we can't recover quickly, we're going to lose those ecosystem services that we so depend upon. Post-fire resources are dismal, reactive, and short-sighted, considering the long-term lingering impacts that these ecosystem altering events like the 200,000 Cameron Peak fire had on the land and the community. You can go on to the next slide. So what are we doing about it? And why am I on this call today? Why am I presenting? We're really committed to providing organizational resources to groups across the country, ranging from fire departments to conservation districts. We're supporting groups from California to Pennsylvania. We provide technical, financial, and mentorship capabilities. We teach, train, and mentor individuals with agencies and those external to the government. We've developed several initiatives, and we're really here trying to figure out how do we get this information to the ground. We provide resources and tools for communities impacted by fire, and we're pushing for the creation of post-fire navigators. Interestingly enough, we've been booed. So I heard someone said something about booing. We've been booed off the stage and called fearmongers, only to have the exact homes, schools, and roads shuttered by the floods our models predictive. We give those on the ground doing the work, the funding, time, and resources they need. It's time we move beyond boos. You can switch the slide. So I think this is really what's most important for all of you, is that what are the opportunities? The noise is real. I think Dave brought it up. He said, you're going to spend 80% of your time searching and 20% of your time using. So I'm constantly bombarded with news, resources, tools, and new programs. How can we expect those practitioners who are underfunded and overworked to invest the time to chase every lead, to read the research and fully understand the resources and tools available? I don't believe we can. We must develop ways to consolidate those tools and information, teach to the need, and limit the barrage. We must keep it simple. The experts, while often good intentioned, do not consider community values. And I'll say that again, they do not consider community values. The outdated approach we've all heard, we're from the government, we're here to help, is still running strong in the wildfire risk reduction community. Preconceived notions and priorities must be a thing of the past. However, the current model is based on a scientist or expert running models behind closed doors and sharing these with the community after they've been completed. If only sitting in front of a computer and inputting numbers could solve the problems we face. Under the bill, or the bipartisan infrastructure bill, there's millions to be invested in community wildfire protection plans. Some of these are going to be amazing. Many are going to be worth about $150,000, and they're going to be holding up a bookshelf. We need to accessibly develop easy to use risk analysis programs and tools that can be shared with the communities as they're updating their community wildfire protection plans. Additionally, as we're talking about, and I'm over time here, about 45 seconds here. Dave, am I still good for another minute or so?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, just want to make sure. I saw some people going over, but I'm very aware and sensitive to everyone's time and the snacks that are needed.
We've taken care of those people who went overtime.
Okay. All right, good. They're in the corner. In many parts of our country, small fire protection districts, volunteer departments, and rural groups are making up 80% of the initial attack response capability, meaning that these are oftentimes underfunded rural community groups. Some of them have some really technical savvy individuals. Oftentimes they don't. So we need to work on ways to embed those resources and data to the responders that are using it. And we need to make sure that we're developing customizable interactive decision support and mapping interfaces that are hosted on the cloud and make the data free or available at a greatly reduced price. Training on how to use it. Environmental work is complex. We need to take the time to develop models that are based on trade-offs, not just the risks, not just on what's there, but how those trade-offs interact and interplay as we're making decisions. I've worked with hundreds of individuals and organizations. The question they always ask me with is, how do we prioritize where to invest this $1? Most of these communities don't even have that. So how do we make sure that we're helping them to make trade-off decisions? I oftentimes tell people too, that if you want to create a risk map, get in your truck, go for a drive with a hard copy map and a marker. We need to make sure that we're not just developing top-down risk analysis, but we're using ground-up processes to inform those top-down tools. RX Fire is not the panacea. It's another tool we can use. I've sat in meetings with residents asking how we could guarantee our fire would be safe. I've had many sleepless nights contemplating if my forecasts and plans were right. To support positive social and environmental outcomes, the practitioners need better tools and direct decision-making support. The responsibility cannot fall upon the shoulders of one individual or agency. So as the chief of the Forest Service stood up and said, we need more information, I would say as those data sets and that information becomes available we all need to stand behind the burn boss or the burn practitioners and say, we're in this with you and we will share the responsibility. There's really no national level effectiveness monitoring in place. I think we can develop that relatively quickly. So to wrap this up, I would just say that I'm available. Our organization is available. We'd love to support the development of new tools, and I would love to share relevant resources that you all create with local communities and local groups that are trying to work through these challenges. I'm excited to work with ESIP and look forward to the collaboration. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. This is a great presentation. Everything worked out well. We were able to hear you. We're here in sunny Pittsburgh, and we were all able to see your slides quite well from Colorado. And I know we have a couple other folks on remotely as well, Gus Calderon and Richard McCrate. They do a lot of work with gathering high-resolution remote sensing imagery to help communities understand their risk through some of the great data that they put together. I think Firewatch is the program that they work on, and that's or that they offer. And that's sort of leading us into the breakout session here. So think about the folks that you talked with before. Online, we're going to break you out into some breakout rooms. May not be the same people. I think it's a random breakout room. And we're going to talk about what are the data to knowledge products for during wildfire community situational awareness. So be creative. Think about not just what a satellite might gather, but how can we turn that data into knowledge for citizens to understand? This is one of the things that we're focusing on, and that is we're not going to deliver information into communities until they can easily understand what those data products mean. So, you know, you just can't deliver her smoke model output. They're not going to understand what happens. Is there AI we can apply to those products to make them understandable so people can click on them and say, the forecast for 3 o'clock this evening is for you not to go outside if you have respiratory distress or you have trouble breathing. The forecast for 7 o'clock is you can go out, but you better have a mask. And then it's expected, the wind's expected to shift, and you can go out safely later that afternoon or in the evening. So this is the question here for our breakout rooms. Get to the right one. Data to knowledge products for during wildfire community situational awareness. Think about near-term risks and immediate actions. So we have climate change, there's vegetation that's stressed, increases fire risk, and many agencies are providing a lot of data. This is quite confusing for the public. They really don't know where their information is coming from. I mean, they know for evacuation orders and things like that. But we're going to take 20 minutes for the breakout session. Please reignite those conversations that you had before within your groups and online. You'll be thrown into the breakout rooms. Jonathan, I really appreciate you joining us and presenting, and please participate here in this breakout room along with all of the other folks that are online. We really appreciate it. Then we'll come back and we'll do a 15-minute report out and discussion with some key takeaway points. There's the Slido code there that you can, the QR code that you can scan to provide input again, like you did in the last session, and we'll gather that input. Karen, did I miss anything? Okay, so we're going to ship you off to your breakout rooms online and in the room. Please regather your conversations. Thanks so much. Okay, everybody, please take the next 30 seconds to wrap up your conversations. The breakout rooms have come back online, so everyone is back together. I wandered the room a little bit, some really awesome conversations, and this is terrific. We're going to send everybody who has registered for this session through the ESIP website a link to the shared Google Doc so you can access everyone's presentation. And we're going to, since we're running a little bit tight on time, we have a pre-recorded update from the NASA Wildfire Program Manager, David Green, who has recorded, just uploaded his presentation as we were starting the session or shortly before that. And we are going to hear now lightning presentations from the ESIP clusters. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do the lightning presentations who are here in person first. And then we're going to take a look at the time we have left, because we also have Maggie Glasgow, who is online, and she is going to give us a briefing on NASA's disasters program. So we were going to finish out the session with the NASA Wildfire Program briefing and then NASA Disasters Program. We're going to have the live briefing from Maggie from NASA Disasters Program, and we'll offer the video presentation to all of you so you can see it. You can see it later. Let's see, what's the order of the, so Steve, yeah, so we'd like to introduce Steve Young. ESIP, as I mentioned, has clusters, as you all may know. And Steve is representing the air quality cluster. We've asked these clusters to come and talk to us here because we want to work together with those clusters. We don't want to do things that other clusters are doing, but we want to leverage the work that they are doing so we can put that into practice as much as possible. So Steve, thanks so much for being here and participating so much. Take the podium.
All right, well, hi, I am Steve Young. I am a retired EPA employee, and I do a little bit of work with a company called Innovate. So I'm going to talk from our air quality group, but this is largely just kind of thoughts we have that are more generalized rather than necessarily air quality specific. Lightning, boom. So recent incidents, minutes can really count in wildfire events. We know that fires affect air quality, not only relatively close to the fire, but quite distant. Situational awareness is vital. People need actionable information. They need models and credible forecasts they can work with. And people need to be informed about what they can do to protect themselves. So a few things to think about. Deployable resources to fill data gaps. So when you do have a situation, if it's not one of these minutes cases at least, can you deploy resources, for example, additional air monitors like purple air type air monitors? Harvesting boots on the ground intelligence that might be coming from sources like social media and fusing that kind of intelligence with other data that might be more authoritative, and good guidance for people who are being affected by smoke and poor air quality. And the air quality, it's not only particulates, ozone, NOx, but also air toxics in general. It could be a pretty toxic soup. I want to suggest 3 axes for thinking about data. The first axis is actionability, the y-axis. The second axis, and I think that's fairly obvious, authoritativeness, which we're talking about a lot. And the third axis is realness. And what do I mean by realness? Everyone knows real time. Think about real place, an actual place and what's going on at that place. And finally, real stuff, colloquial, but what's in the air in this context? What are the actual substances in the air and what are the concentration levels? So that's what real stuff means. And realness, I think, is pretty important. So you could have data that's authoritative but not real actionable. You could have actionable data that's not real, et cetera. I don't have enough time. In the interest of time, you can read, these are just some thoughts about possible model needs, that could be delivered to people. And because this is lightning, could talk about all this stuff later, but thank you.
That's great, Steve. Thanks. Our next presentation is going to be from, let me get the right part of the agenda here. From the Information Quality Cluster that we work with a lot, actually. The Disaster Lifecycle Cluster has performed briefings to the Information Quality Cluster group and has asked the Information Quality Cluster group to provide input to the disaster lifecycle because we've worked over the last couple of years developing operational readiness levels for data, ORLs, that are being put to use by decision makers within the All Hazards Consortium, decision makers like the utility sector, transportation, communications, medical supply, logistics, corporations. DHS and FEMA are now looking at the ORLs as a great way to identify trusted data. So with the Information Quality Cluster, we have Zong Liu, who is the current chair. And so thanks so much, Zong, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. As you probably noticed, I'm not Bob. So Bob has the first author has a time conflict, so cannot attend this this session. So I'll do my best to present his presentations. Okay, so I'd like to acknowledge the authors for this presentation. Rama, most of you probably already know him very well. Peng, Yaxin, and David. Yeah, and today's okay, from the ESIP Information Quality Cluster. Today I'm going to talk about information quality and wildfires. So prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery, the 4 stages in wildfire life cycle. Okay, so these are some examples of necessary information by stage to deal with wildfires. For example, combustibles, brushes, dry grass for the prevention at the prevention stage. Yeah, also there are quite a number of examples for the other 3 stages. And the image on the right is a product from CDEC, Social and Economic Data Center, has mappers. As you can see, there's a fire, I think north of Denver. I think it's a Boulder fire. Yeah. Okay, the URL is there. Feel free to take a look. Yeah, so the takeaway message is accurate, timely, accessible, integrated, easy to use information is critical at each of these steps. Ensuring availability of such information is a key for pre-fire challenges. So let's talk about the aspects of information quality throughout the dataset lifecycle, implication for wildfires. Coincidentally, we also have 4 stages showing in the on the right. So for the interest of time, so feel free to take a look at the paper published last year. The DOI is listed below the image. Basically, we have a science quality, such as accuracy, precision, uncertainty, and suitability for use, fitness for purpose. And this part is very difficult, probably the most difficult one. For example, for precipitation, we're still facing a lot of data quality issues, especially on a global scale. Yeah. Also the product quality, how good is the science quality documentation, how accurate, complete, and up to date metadata. So now we're talking about the metadata and also documentation. So right now there's a kind of lack of standard, yeah, although we have a data product developer guide already available, but we still deal with a lot of legacy data, yeah. Also the stewardship quality, how well the data are being managed and preserved. That's our justice duty, Also service quality, how easy it is for user to discover and get and understand, trust and use a given data product along with its metadata, availability and so on, there. So the takeaway message is potential users need to know about the quality of the data set and the information that they plan to use. It is especially critical for data and the information that are used when preventing, preparing, responding, and recovering from a wildfire and other disasters. So finally, all required information elements should pay attention to and be judged by this aspect of information quality. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Yong-Lu. The next presenter is going to be Jonathan Blythe from BOEM, who is going to talk about the Community Resilience Cluster. And we've talked a lot about bringing data into communities and what it takes to be trusted when you go into communities. I was just in St. Petersburg, Florida last week at a National Academy of Sciences meeting on managed retreat from the coastline and what's happening with insurance rates and flood rates and all that stuff. And some residents are saying, we're paying more for our flood insurance now than we are for our mortgage. They bought their house and now their insurance has doubled their mortgage payment, if not more. And they also said, if you want to come in and work with communities, you have to work with the pastors and the churches and work with the folks who form their own communities, whether it's Latino or Spanish communities or Cuban communities. They turn inward when they look for trusted information. And so it's important to bring in additional languages too. So we know that community resilience is critical. That's why we wanted Jonathan and the Community Resilience Cluster to come in and give us a lightning talk, because this is just the beginning of us working closer together in ESIP so we can bring trusted data into communities. Jonathan, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So I know we're short on time, so I'll try to speed through these. I need to recognize the Community Resilience Cluster with contributions from the two co-leads, Arika Virapongsi, Rupu Gupta, also Zachary Robbins, who was an ESIP fellow a couple years ago and now has graduated with his PhD and is expert in this wildfire area. So here are some definitions from the cluster. The main point I'd like to raise here is we looked at, we're probably going to be able to contribute much more to the recovery phase, but something that's often been confounded or confused is sustainability. Resilience doesn't necessarily have to return a community back to the current or the status quo. And so we're talking about more complex forms of resilience where it could reduce fire risk or improve management. Oh, sorry, okay. I need to really gloss over this slide, but here are some more concepts, and the things we're trying to advance in the Community Resilience Cluster are the use of these ecological concepts for better management of our science data and how they can improve community resilience. So one of the on the ground or during the wildfire events are how the communities are responding and evacuating, whether they have the capability to leave, and the psychological and social factors at play. So the bottom line is that the agencies and authorities who are calling these evacuation orders, if they know and understand these communities better beforehand, they can be more effective at evacuating people. Also, firefighters during the wildfire, you know, there's some sense that we could be using modeling to better inform their tactical decisions. But, you know, we want to try to move away from reactive firefighting to more strategic, and that could include some of these considerations. That also, as Jonathan Bruno brought up, involves community values and needs, information needs. So I think there's a lot of interest from the Community Resilience Cluster, and we look forward to interacting more on this, both this topic of during the wildfire, but I think we'll have a lot more to contribute in January to the after recovery phase. Here's a picture that one of the co-author, the PhD fellow, he took. This is in New Mexico, and shows the social ecological system. You have the wilderness and the urban interface in Albuquerque, and some of his fire scenarios in the Southern Appalachians. Zachary Robbins, sorry. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. This is great. And remember, these lightning talks are just to give us all a taste of what the clusters are working on. And we encourage you to access the documents on the website. We're working, Sean and I are working now on sharing that Google Doc to make sure that you have access to it and you should receive an email. Our next presenter is going to be Maggie Glasgow. Maggie has been participating in this entire session. Maggie used to work at JPL, and within the last year or so, maybe it's 2 years, Maggie, I don't know, COVID kind of gives us a blurring of time. But Maggie's at University of Alabama, Huntsville, and she supports the disasters program at NASA and is going to be giving us an overview of the disasters program. And so Maggie can't share her screen, so we'll have to pull her presentation up. So we'll do that, Maggie, and share our screen so you can talk to that presentation. We're going to go a few minutes over with this session, but we tend to do that no matter how much time we have. As Megan shakes her head while she's leaving.
No, thank you so much, Dave. I will try to go through it quickly.
No worries, Maggie. Don't feel like you're rushed. We're watching and waiting with open ears for your presentation as John brings up the slides. So we're just about there, and here we go. It's all yours.
Great, thank you. As Dave mentioned, I'm speaking on behalf of the NASA Disasters Program. I am a disaster coordinator in the program. Unfortunately, Shana McLean was unable to join us today, so I was asked to go ahead and give this briefing on her behalf for the program. And thank you, Sean, for helping me out with this, because NASA does not allow us to access Zoom in its full glory. Okay, next slide, please. So I just wanted to go over really quickly here what the program vision is. It's an inclusive and interdisciplinary program, and we're focused on improving understanding of disasters and decision-making related to preparedness, risk reduction, response, and recovery. And one of the main goals of the program, of course, is to build more impactful, science-informed, and resilient communities around the world. We do this through different programmatic investments to generate our innovative technologies, and also to help lower the technical and institutional barriers to using Earth science information. And this is both Earth observations and different modeling products and other sorts of things that we are able to provide from NASA. Next slide, please. So the Applied Sciences has a rather large research portfolio for this program, and listed here are the different projects that are associated with the applied research portion of disasters. These are RNA, well, sort of RNA type projects that are funded under the NASA ROSES proposal calls. And you can see here that we have a wide variety of different hazards that we actually cover within the program. And one of those is, it should be in here, forecasting of fire behavior and smoke impact. So that is one of the appropriate parts of the research portfolio that that would be helpful for what we're doing here in the cluster as far as the wildfire. But you can see that it's a multi-hazard program that covers a number of different projects. Next slide, please. Now, the main focus of the disasters program is response, though we are working on helping out with resilience and other topics. But what we do is create applications that feed into supporting decision makers and providing situational awareness. So we engage stakeholders in the use of Earth observations throughout the disaster lifecycle. And then we help to demonstrate the value and impact of Earth observations to support decision making. And what we want to do is help to enable our stakeholders and partners to improve their own capabilities to leverage Earth observations. And you can see here on the right, there's a figure here that talks about the cycle and sort of the different aspects of creating products and supporting the decision-making process. Next slide, please. Now, I think that this is probably something that would be of most interest here. We have a ESRI program, disasters program portal that provides both singular products, some near real time, and also when we have an event, the GIS team creates story maps that support the event. The URL is right here at the top. As I mentioned, we have featured story maps, we have near real-time dashboards, and we have different tiles that correspond to different hazards. There's event-specific products, risk reduction information, external resources, and the near real-time products. And when we have any events, they are directly linked from that portal landing page. Next slide, please. So here's just an example of a story map. It tells the story there of what's going on with the disaster, and it shows what we can provide at NASA as far as data products to help support activities that are related to responding to that disaster. And it also highlights the products and disaster impacts. And as you can see on the top there, there's different tabs. And so the intro tab sort of gives you a background of the event, and then you can click on the tabs above to see specific products. Next slide, please. We also have interactive widgets and apps that help to explain the products and show ways to use the data. So for example, if you were to have before and after imagery, a lot of times they'll put a slider bar in there to see the impact by sliding and seeing the before and after images. And there's other tools that help to highlight different portions of what we're looking at. Next slide, please. Okay, I think that we're going to the near real-time dashboard next. So next slide. So, okay, so here is the page for wildfires. That's part of that section of hazard tabs. So if you click on it, you can see sort of an intro about wildfires and see where we have responded to specific events and specifically what wildfire events that we have responded to and have data available. Next slide, please. So just to wrap up, I believe this is the last slide. Looking forward, we're going to be developing and creating a new dedicated disaster response coordination office. This will help to manage the capabilities of the program and gives one central location for helping to direct our efforts for response. We also have the Disasters Program quarterly newsletter. And if you go to the Disasters webpage, there's a link there for you to sign up for it. And then we've also developed an earth science application guidebook. And this covers a lot of those multi-hazards that I mentioned and goes into more detail about some of the projects that are supporting the program. And then next slide. Yep, that's it. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you. I just wanted to mention that Shana McLean is the new program manager for disasters, and her two associates are Dave Borges and Robert Emerson. So with that, I will close, and I thank you very much.
Maggie, thanks so much. We really appreciate that. We're a little bit over for today, but we do want to have a little bit of a wrap up here. I'll just make a couple comments, and then Karen, you can close us out. We encourage you to remain connected to the ESIP website through Sketch so we can get you connected with any additional information. What Maggie presented was an overview of the disasters program. We're putting a video also for you to access in the Google Doc for an overview of NASA's wildfire program, through which David Green is the program manager. He was unable to join us today, but he was gracious enough to put together a video that we're going to make available. And the word clouds and things like that we collected from all of the breakouts today, we're going to pull those together, and we really encourage you, if you found this interesting, you found that you want to continue to participate and see what's going on with wildfires in the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster, please join our meetings. Again, it's at the first Thursday of every month at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And we really hope that you join us so we can get, we really value your input and want to engage you in these conversations because we're getting closer and closer to start to engage communities. The next thing that we're going to do, we didn't have time, we actually took it out of the agenda, which is probably good. We were going to have a, yeah, here's the QR code for the meeting materials. So if you want to capture that QR code, then you can get access to the meeting materials to download via Google, Google Drive folder. We were going to have another session breakout on from the Education Committee on how we can work with communities and what are the challenges they've experienced with NOAA's Climate Program Office. So NOAA has spent a lot of time working to engage communities, particularly in sea level rise and coastal vulnerabilities. And Luann Dahlman, who's part of the Education Committee, provided us with some great input. I mean, real input with boots on the ground on what we need to think about and what we need to do. So we, as the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster, are going to asked to engage with the education cluster in one of their monthly meetings, probably in August or September, to talk to them about what we want to do in the winter meeting. So we'll have the Education Committee come and present in our session. We're going to propose another session like this for the winter meeting, where we talk about post-wildfire threats and engaging with communities. So we're going to bring all of this together. It kind of might seem like a, a little hodgepodge, but we do have a vision, and things are coming together. And hearing your discussions are really heartening that we are on a good path to leverage a lot of expertise because in the future, and maybe in the not too distant future, there could be a lot of funding available for connecting with communities. And we want to be there when that happens. And when that happens, we can hire all the ESIP fellows and put them to work, and all the students that are here to learn more and engage, and then put researchers' expertise to work. So that's it for me. I appreciate everybody coming. Karen, anything else you'd like to say to close us out so we can get to some dinner?
Or the poster session is next for us in reception. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I participated online with some of the group there, including Jonathan Bruno, and he's agreed we're going to have a follow-up session. I think several of you spoke about in your group discussions about evacuation planning, and that is fairly chaotic in there apparently, and I think there might be a real contribution we can make to help with that process and strategize. So Jonathan Bruno with the collaboratives, coalitions and collaboratives group has agreed to join us during one of our upcoming meetings. So we'll arrange that and get that word out. But if you find that interesting, I think it certainly involves the resilience efforts, and it kind of, that whole planning process sits between active fires, mitigation, as well as recovery. So it would cover a wide span of the kinds of topics that we've been dealing with. We might be able to get a real product out of it. So I want to thank everybody for all those contributions.
That's great, Karen. And just online, for those of you who are still there, Bob Chen, Jonathan Bruno, and also Heath Hockenberry, and all the speakers, thank you so much for sticking with us for this 3-hour session. It's a new experience for us to have a 3-hour session, and maybe we'll propose a 4-hour next winter, so we keep everybody on time. So thanks everybody for joining the session, and enjoy the poster session tonight.